Welcome to TTV. On behalf of all Rhode Island Tea Party members and volunteers, I'm really pleased to introduce Bob Cushman, to be formal, Robert Cushman, but I'm going to call you Bob throughout the show. Bob is a former chairperson of the Warwick School Committee and former city council member. My name is Lisa Blais.
Nice to be
Hi,
here.
Bob.
Nice to
I'm
be
so
here.
glad you're here.
Thank you.
So you and I go back quite a few years. And when you were back on the school committee and the city council, you really had some massive issues to deal with. And I'm hoping that we can sort of talk about that and then make some kind of comparison to whether or not times have changed.
You know, the sad thing, Lisa, is times haven't changed. The things that I talked about when I was on the school committee, I know I was on the school committee back in 2004 to 2006, right. 2007, 2008 on the city council. And one of my big issues, you know, I went through a tough period of time with trying to negotiate a teacher's contract, saw that we got absolutely no help from the General Assembly in terms of making, you know, maybe negotiations a little bit easier.
Yeah.
On the city council, the big issue with, you know, municipal government years ago was the cost of pensions and health care.
How many years ago are we talking about, Bob?
We're talking on the city council, 2007, 2008, right. And then on the school committee, 2004. And it's really sad. I see the issues. I write a bi-weekly column in the Warwick Beacon, and I talk about a lot of these issues all the time. And it's like deja vu. I'm writing about the same stuff that I experienced. We're going into contract negotiations with the teachers. Yeah. They've hired the same team when I was there, and I could just see what's going to happen. We're going to end up probably getting a work to rule. The contract negotiations, I was behind the scenes, and they're dominated by basically salary and benefit type things.
So let me stop you there. So all those years ago, 04 and 05, you're on the school committee, right? And then a few years later you moved to the city council. That means that you had an opportunity to understand what the impact of the content of contracts are on property taxes.
Absolutely.
I think back then they were running somewhere around 75–80% of the, I call them cost drivers, the things in all of the contracts that cost hard dollars of the budget.
Yes.
Is that accurate?
When you look at Warwick right now, probably like any city in town, you're probably talking about 85, 86, 87% of the budget on the school side, and close to that on the city side now too.
And so how much of that would you say, ballpark? I'm not looking for you to be a calculator on a TV show just having some conversation. We don't want the Projo coming after you, but just to give our viewers a sense, how much of that, say roughly, would come out of property taxes just to pay for things like salaries and benefits, which I believe are the biggest items in the contract?
That's what we talked about. 85, 86% of the school budget is salary and benefits strictly. Now, when you go to the city side, it's not as high with the salary, but the benefits, the pensions, the health care, those get you way up into about 80% too. So, you see it happening every single day in every municipality where street paving's being cut. We had programs in Warwick where it was called the night program, where as a councilman, I could call on at the police department and say, I have a problem in my ward and this section, can you do a little bit of extra patrol work? That's gone, it's been cut. We don't pave our streets anymore. We've shut down, we're turning off our street lights. And I want to be a little kudos to the city workers and the police and the fire department. They're doing a lot more with a lot less. Well, why is that? Taxes keep going up because legacy costs. When I talk about legacy costs, I'm talking about employees who get lifetime health care. I'm talking about outrageous pensions.
Stop there.
Okay.
Employees who get lifetime health care. So you're telling our viewers that there are contracts in Warwick that still have that promise?
Absolutely. This is how outrageous it is. You can start working, let's say you got a job with the city of Warwick at 45 years of age. You work 10 years and you retire at 55, you just got eligible for lifetime health care for 10 years of work.
So approximately how much is health insurance? 12, 14, $1,500 a month?
Well, yeah, you're talking about $16,000, $17,000 a year. And you know what? These are top-of-the-line plans, too.
That's right.
These aren't the kind of plans, I work in private industry right now where I just got the big notice. Hey, guys, guess what? Your health care is going up.
Absolutely.
Now, either you could pay more or you could rework your plan
and reduce your benefits. And you know what? You say it's not, these are top-of-the-line health insurance benefits. I believe somewhere around $1,300, $1,400 a month premium for 2 adults, I'm not talking about in the public sector, talking in the private sector, with the health insurance carrier there that has traditionally monopolized health insurance in this state, $500 deductible. And we're talking about $1,300, $1,400 a month. I wouldn't say pardon me, $1,000 deductible. I wouldn't say that having to take the first $1,000 out of your pocket is, a top-notch plan, and still it's costing that much money.
Well, just for example, the school teachers in Warwick, I was on the school committee when we negotiated the first contract. We got an $11 copay, $11 a week.
$11.
It's still there. Now, on the city side, they went from $11 to $14 for a single plan and $28. That's still, what, 5-6%?
So you know something, Bob? We've talked a lot, and we're not going to pretend that we haven't. $11 a week is like, manna from heaven, right? Yeah, that's unbelievable.
It is.
So if I were a union rep, I would say what most people have heard union reps say, for those folks that pay attention, of why are you trying to, drag us down? We should be pulling everybody else that's had to pay the $1,400 a month to be able to enjoy our $11 a week health insurance. Except their health insurance isn't $11. We're paying the balance. Is that right? You're
absolutely right. And what happens is, think about it, when healthcare goes up by 10% a year, those copays are frozen. So what does that mean? That means either you raise your taxes, or you got to cut your spending. And we've seen combinations of both. We've seen the mayor of Warwick, cut programs, great programs. We've seen the school department close 4 schools in the city of Warwick, but yet our taxes continue to go up. And I've done a lot of analysis. I looked at, I think over the last since 2004, I think we've raised about, I have my stats here, about $40 million in new taxes. So we do a heck of a job of raising taxes.
That's easy.
Well, you know where all the money's gone to? It hasn't gone towards capital improvements. It hasn't gone towards hiring new people. We've cut our staff. It's gone towards pensions and health care and salary increases. That's it.
So these are sort of legacy costs. Where do you think they all began, or is there, actually I'm not going to be coy about this. Governor Chafee makes a lot of noise about referencing when he was mayor of Warwick and how he understands how to get out from underwater. You've done a lot of research. You sat on the school committee years following, so you got to see it from the inside. You were chair, and you were on the city council. What would you say about the days that he was mayor and the effect of some of his decisions on those contracts?
Well, I would think that, it's great that we have a governor that was a former mayor. But why don't you think about what you had to, deal with when you were the mayor? Why don't you turn back that clock, turn back that time, and see? Well, let me give you some perfect examples where, Mayor Chafee, when he was mayor, these provisions were in the contract. We have sick pay buyouts, where employees basically get paid not to call in sick. Now, in private industry,
paid not to call in sick. We have to have an incentive to not call in sick.
Yeah. So they, you accumulate them. Once you hit 90 days on the city side. Now you can start to get paid for these. You can get sick pay bonuses at the end of the year in December. When you retire, the municipal employees in the contract can cash in the 90 days, get 6 months more towards their pension. These costs, in the last 2 years, I think 2.5, 3 years in Warwick, we spent over $1 million paying people for not calling in sick.
$1 million just to come in and do their job for which they get paid to do, instead of staying home and saying, I'm sick.
So when we get back to, Governor Chafee, he talks about, well, the cities and towns have been cut to the bone. I would say, no, they haven't. I'm glad the cities and towns got cut, because it would force people to become a little bit more efficient and stop pulling these things out of these contracts that are bankrupting these cities. But here's the problem. I was on the school committee. People criticized me for the contract we signed. We have a 20 teacher layoff clause. You are not going to, there's nothing you could give to the Warwick teachers to get rid of that. They will not get rid of that.
What does that mean?
It means you can only lay off 20 teachers a year maximum.
Even if student enrollment were to plummet?
Student enrollment in the city of Warwick has been plummeting for years. We've closed 4 schools down. We're probably going to have to look at closing even more schools down because the population has just been dropping. But because of this restriction in this contract, I'm not, you can't lay off more than 20. And I look at the situation in Providence, for example, where, I don't want to see teachers get cut. But we're in a situation right now where if the unions don't decide to start tackling pension reform and reforming the health care, the active employees are going to lose jobs. That's what's happening right now.
Well, that's exactly right. And, it's interesting because a lot of people begin to see these kinds of conversations as somehow drawing a line that our public sector employees aren't needed or aren't respected. And that couldn't be further from the truth. Indeed, I'm thinking, watching what's going on in this state, that they're not being respected by union leadership because they're not being told the truth. We have Gina Raimondo out here now, right? And she's finally being straight, so far, talking about what's going on with the pension. And she said, I believe recently, it's not an issue, it is the issue. It is a pension crisis. So I find it frustrating as a native Rhode Islander, Bob, that we keep saying if the unions don't get honest, if the unions don't start telling their own membership that we're going to hang on, come hell or high water, to benefits that taxpayers no longer can afford or sustain, they're only hurting their own members.
You're absolutely right about that, and it's disappointing that, you know, I just testified we had a big pension reform situation go on in Warwick.
Yes.
And it's applying to new employees. And, you know, we get up there, we do the stats, and here's the most frustrating thing to me, just to digress a little bit.
Sure.
The same pension people that work for the state also work for the city of Warwick.
Right, right.
They were in the city council chambers on a Monday night, and we asked them about rates of return. I don't want to confuse people too much and get too complicated, but there's assumptions in pensions. And, you know, we have an 8% return to work, which means...
Nobody's getting 8%.
No, it's, you know who's getting 8% returns on their investments. So when you look at the 10 years rates of returns, you're lucky if you get 2 or 3%.
Yes.
So that's there. So we're trying to tell these actuary people who basically tell us how much we should be paying into the pension system, oh, this seems really unrealistic. So they come in and they say, well, we're not ready to knock that down in the city of Warwick. 2 days later, they appear before Gina Raimondo and the retirement board, same two guys, and they recommend reducing the rate from 8.25 to 7.5. Why wouldn't they make that same recommendation to the city of Warwick?
Right.
What it tells me is, you know, in a lot of this pension reform, there's a lot of politics going on. Because think about it. You know, these guys want to be the consultants to the city of Warwick.
Yes.
If you knock down the rate of return, which means you're not making as much interest on your investments, what does that mean? It means the taxpayers and the employees are going to have to contribute more into the pension plan.
Right.
So why would they do something like that? They would do something like that to hide the real fact of the problem. And I got to say, at least Gina Raimondo's coming out and she's really trying to quantify the problem. One of the things I think needs to happen in the municipalities is they need to do the same thing. Perfect example. I ran the numbers from the actuary people based on the ridiculous 8% return.
Yeah.
The pension reform that the city council just passed will not save $1 next year. It won't save $1 2 years from now. It won't save $1 3 years from now. 4 years from now in 2015, you know how much money we're going to save? $49,000. Wow.
Bob.
Well, because we looked at the annual contributions recommended by the actuary. Now, you got to remember, these reforms are only for new employees.
Right.
So while we're saving $49,000 4 years from now?
So wait a sec. So one of the reforms is based on for new employees, which the city probably can't afford to hire anyway, because I heard you say earlier that it's cut back. It's cut back,
Absolutely.
Right, on services.
Yes.
You need people to fulfill services, and even at an efficient level, you can't go below that, or now you're just paying overtime just to try to run and stay in place, yes? So you're saying that this proposal was for new hires that can't afford to hire, projected out 4 years from now what we might save. How about looking at a structural change, because you're the numbers guy, I tend to look at things sort of from a big picture perspective. What's going on with the current folks in the system? What changes have been made there?
There's nothing. And you know, to the point, we said $49,000 are being saved.
Yeah.
Well,
what are we spending to get there, by the way?
$6.5 million.
Oh, lovely.
So that means we need $6.5 million 4 years from now, which is going to continually go up, just to be able to make the annual required contributions. And then we have Governor Chafee out there saying he's got this mask municipal accountability.
Something or other saying to the locals, to all the locals, if you put in what you're supposed to put in, per the numbers people that tell you what you're supposed to put in, then we'll be good to you and we'll...
Well, he's saying they're going to give you, the carrot, we'll give you a little bit more money.
First of all, the state doesn't have any money.
Absolutely.
Second of all, if the cities and towns had the money to put in what their actuaries said you should put in this year toward the pension so that you can properly fund it based on the projections that we think we're right about, then they wouldn't be underfunded.
Well, let me give you...
So how does the governor, this is something that's really frustrating, I think, to most people. How can the governor say to the cities and towns, do it with a carrot and stick? If they had the money, I think they would have already done it.
They can't do it. And let me give you a perfect example right now, because we don't even talk about health care. The unfunded health care liability is because of the lifetime health care that the
for
employees
retirees.
get. It's worse than the pensions. If we were to make the annual required contributions for pensions and health care in the city this year, we would need $14 million more in Warwick to put in.
14 million.
14 million, just to make the annual. So when Governor Chafee makes these comments, he's delusional. He knows
and
it
with
can't
all
be
due
done.
respect, I agree with you. It is delusional. Tell me if I've got this number right or wrong. I believe Gina Raimondo said, or was it Ernie Almonte, at a recent URI conference on this whole pension issue. Right now, we are so underwater with the pensions that there's a $13,000 debt and ticking over the head of every man, woman, and child in the state. Is that right?
And that's just the state. Now, let's talk about Warwick again, because I know the numbers.
Exactly.
We're talking about in Warwick, with the unrealistic assumptions of the 8% return and everything else, we're probably talking about unfunded liabilities close to $600 million in Warwick. Now, we have 80-something
and Warwick is
people.
fiddling around with what we might change for new hires who can't afford to hire.
And here's the thing that you know what, this really frustrates me about the politicians. All this is a headline grab.
Right.
Now, when I run for re-election next year, I could put on my palm cup, I did pension reform.
Right.
And everybody's going to believe it.
Right.
But we've done absolutely nothing.
And so you know something, that's really why I'm very happy that you're here, because as you know, the Rhode Island Tea is just simply a grassroots movement of regular people, like me, like you, that are paying attention, and hopefully we're getting a hold of the imaginations and the minds of people that didn't normally pay attention to politics in this state, to talk about these kinds of things and begin to pay attention to what it means to every one of our pockets. This isn't about any particular political party, right? It's not about Republican, it's not about Democrat, it's not about the moderate, which is now a bona fide party in this state. It's about the livelihoods and our economic well-being going forward. So I also remember, maybe you do too, that Gina Raimondo had made a comment. I can't remember if it was at a public presentation or if it was on the radio, that there were some General Assembly people up in the State House that were quietly imploring her not to take on this massive issue. Do you remember hearing that?
I absolutely, because what they're basically, it's the code words to say, you know, if you take on this issue, if you expose this, organized labor is not going to like this. And what's going to happen is, just by dropping the rate on the state from 8 to 7.5, we saw the contributions. I think we're going to need $300 million more. Where are we going to get that money from?
And that's
so you know what organized labor and a lot of people are saying? No, let's just keep lying to people.
Right.
And the frustrating thing is, you know, I've talked at city council meetings where, you know, you have some workers in the back, TPW workers, they're heckling us. And we're saying, I don't have any skin in the game. I could leave this state.
Right.
And I'm going to tell you, if things don't get better 10 or 15 years from now, you won't see me here because I don't want to pay that bill. And what's going to happen is, to those employees, they're not going to get these pensions and these health care promises.
And that's what's so frustrating. It's not okay to treat people like sheep. It's not okay to just say, just keep repeating this phrase, because if I repeat it to you long enough, you'll take it as truth, so that the hecklers come out. The hecklers should be paying attention to what's going to happen to them, because they do have skin in the game.
You know what I would like to know? I would like to know the George Nees and the Bob Casey's and all the people from NEA, do they have the state pension system, or do they have their own pension system?
I don't know, let's find out.
I mean, that would be a great question to ask, because are they really concerned about their members and what's going to happen to their members?
You know what, I think that's a very reasonable, fair question. But rather than personalize it, even though they're public figures, they're in the State House all of the time, they're lobbying, they seem to be tin-eared to the financial crisis that's taking place across the state. But we won't personalize it. But that's a perfect segue to talk about where do they get all the money to lobby, to keep pushing, to get a zillion bills coming in 40 different directions up at the General Assembly to maintain their status quo hold on the locals in terms of what's in the contract, on mandates that are in the laws that tie the hands of many city council members to try to find ways to save and run more efficiently for the taxpayers. It happens, and I know you know this, because union dues are required through public law to be a public employee. So if I wanted to, say, be a teacher, which I went to school for years ago, and I wanted to work in the public school system, I am forced basically to pay those union dues if I want to maintain that employment. Somehow that seems like legal extortion to me. Do you agree?
Well, it makes the balance power, you know, for people like a group like the Tea Party and people that are trying to organize. You don't have this self-funding mechanism. if you did, if we could take $1 out of everybody's tax return.
Well, let me tell you something, Bob. The Tea Party is just regular citizens,
yes,
right?
Yes.
But the imbalance that it creates is that us, collectively, regular citizen taxpayers, our money is paying for those public sector employees, as we should. But our money, in the form of that paycheck, is then coming out as union dues, going to the very business, and it is a business, to have these public sector union leaders, like we've named, push an agenda that does nothing but force the private taxpayer further underwater, because we're running out of money. And they're doing it politically with our money.
And the thing is, we don't want to, give a black eye, like to the police, the fire, the municipal. We need this. They do a valuable job. We want them to make a good wage. We want them to have good benefits. But when you're starting to pay people that are retired a greater retirement pension than the actual people that are doing the work, that's a problem.
By the way, a pension that may actually be more than what they were earning when they were working.
Yes, and you know what, Governor, we're going to go back to Governor Chafee for a second. So what can we do to change some of this stuff? I'm going to tell you right now, going behind, and you're looking at Mayor Tavares right now. He's having problems trying to get, $6 million savings from the police and fire. There's no more give and take anymore. There's nothing left. And I'm saying right now, because I've been in these negotiations, you are not going to remove some of these restrictive things from these contracts. You need to legislate them. It's the reason why I lost my council race, because the unions don't want to hear this kind of thing. But for example, the state of Massachusetts, their General Assembly just passed, to me, historic legislation that's basically saying that we're going to pull health care out of the collective bargaining contract.
And what that means is, as I understand it, is health care will no longer be a negotiable item during bargaining. Is that right?
Yeah, and let's think about this for a second. If we could put a reasonable 20% copay on all Warwick school teachers, on everybody in the municipal government, we could save millions of dollars. Now, what could we do with that money? Well, maybe we don't have to have a tax increase, first of all, but let's talk about what can we do for the employees. We can buy them the police cars they need. We could start funding for the educational materials and the other kind of programs that need to take place in the school. We could actually put that money back into the things that they need to do their jobs.
That's exactly right. What they need to do their jobs, and by the way, what the taxpayers pay for. So our public school system, right? Our police, our fire, we expect quality services. And we're paying for them. We're still ranked, I think, fourth highest in property taxes.
Yes. And I think for fire services, we're #1 in the country.
And we're number one in the country for fire, somewhere around there, pretty high.
Yeah.
The point is that the money isn't necessarily going to improve the quality of services, because we've proven in the track record in Rhode Island that just throwing more money at salary and benefits does not improve quality, does not improve efficiency. Let's talk about education for a moment. How many school districts have agreed? Because, signing a contract takes two parties. How many school committees over the years in Rhode Island have agreed to contracts that certainly provided lucrative increases, automatic increases without accountability for job performance? That's another conversation we could have, right? Great benefits, but in the meantime, the textbooks in the schools could be 10 years old. There's something wrong with that equation.
I've seen that trade-off. I was part of that trade-off, sadly, where you have to say, okay, we want to upgrade our 10-year-old social study, books, put a program in, and it gets on the chopping block. It's sad. It's criminal.
So what happens is it is criminal. What happens is the adult interests are put before the kids' interests in schools, when we talk about schools, and it's put before services, say for fire or police. If our police officers are running around in nasty-looking cars, that doesn't say much for the financial health or the pride of the city or town. I don't want our police cars looking like gangster cars. Is that a silly thing to say?
Absolutely. We want to make sure that they have the apparatus and everything else they need to do their jobs effectively, so they're protected. We want to make sure that we're not cutting full force. And I'm going to tell you right now, what I think is going to happen in Providence if they don't get concessions, you're going to see, just like it's happening in cities and towns all across the country, people are going to lose their jobs. Which
is a shame. And as a matter of fact, people have lost their jobs.
Yes.
So instead, folks who are bargaining these contracts are insisting on maintaining the status quo or getting a quid pro quo, right? I'll give you a concession that appears to be a concession today, but I get payback 2 years from now.
It happens all the time.
And in the meantime, our programs are suffering. That's not okay, and people are losing their jobs.
And you know what you do when you look at these contracts? you look at these contracts and you see that by pushing stuff down the line, it's creating more unfunded liabilities.
Exactly.
We already have too many unfunded lialities. So to me, okay, what's the answer?
Right.
To me, the answer is I think we got to be more aggressive. But here's the problem. You know, Gina Raimondo talks about, and I love what she's doing. And she doesn't want to point fingers, but I think we need to stop pointing fingers.
I think to a certain degree you're right. You know, I always would say when it comes to public policy, you know what, blame, blame, blame. It's the typical Rhode Island shtick. Everybody loves the latest fire, but let's figure out how to come to a solution. And so I appreciate when she says that. But blame, sorry to interrupt you, Bob, who are the people that told her to stay away? Now that's fair game, because there's an election coming.
Yeah, but you know what? We want people, we have people in office that are willing to be, I guess I want to call them the sacrificial lambs. You know, what are you getting involved with politics for? Is it for your big ego? Is so I can get up there and, oh, I'm a state representative. No, you should be getting up there to do the right thing for who?
Right.
Not only for us, but for our kids.
That's right.
You know, I heard a guy, a real sad story. His daughter's graduating from college. She's out of state. He told her, do not come back to the state. He loves his daughter.
There's nothing here.
No, there isn't anything here.
Sadly, there's nothing here for her.
In terms of jobs.
In terms of real jobs,
yes.
in the private sector. Certainly, if she had the right last name, maybe there'd be a great gig at the State House.
There we go. We've seen that
you know,
recently.
There's so much that needs to happen here, and my own children left the state, and they're not coming back. I don't need to tell them. They're smart enough to know that there's nothing here, although we did tell them.
But here's what we need to do. I mean, you know what? I love the fact that we saw the business people finally step up to the plate.
Amen.
Finally. Okay, but don't go away.
That's right. And don't think, just because Speaker Fox has come out and said, not comfortable with this, or however he put it, baloney. Something is going on. It's not that simple. Because if these folks were really serious about wanting to make structural changes in the government, this stuff would have been talked about back even before session started.
I heard your other session when you talked about the legislative lobbyists.
Yes.
How many real bills are up there about reforming pension, about reforming the health care?
None.
About
As a matter of fact,
out of these
Bob, one of the pension reform is obviously on the Rhode Island Tea Party's legislative agenda. And so, you know, we're hawking, looking for the things that are important to everybody in this state. I believe there's been one we've testified on. On the other hand, there have been somewhere between 6, 9, 10 bills that we've had to testify in opposition to because they would simply sink the taxpayer further down in the hole. It's almost like some of these representatives and senators just don't hear it.
Well, there's a couple things that's either going to happen. Either people are going to continue to be lied to because, you know, these obligations are growing larger and larger and larger, and maybe we'll stop funding them again.
Right.
You know, so we'll just keep pushing it off years after year. But, you know, the bottom line is, you know, who's at fault? It's the labor people, it's the labor leaders, but it's the citizens of Rhode Island for letting this happen.
It's time we wake up.
We got to wake up. You better start getting people. You know, I hate what happened in East Providence. You had some great people in East Providence on that school committee.
They were carpet bombed. So were some great people on the city council.
Yes.
And I think the percentage of voter turnout in East Providence was really low. Maybe just under half or somewhere around that. All the voters were not heard because, unfortunately, sometimes Rhode Islanders have a tendency of thinking, somebody else will take care of it. Well, nobody else is going to take care of it until people start picking up the phone.
What happened when the business came in and they made a dramatic change? That's the first time they've seen that in a while. But
last time the businesses made noise, I think, was in the 90s when insurance companies were pulling out of the state because they didn't want to cover workers' comp claims anymore because we're so darn corrupt. You know, it seems to be our history in this state. Finally, the businesses woke up and they need to stay on it.
Absolutely.
Because we're not seeing anything coming out of the State House that even suggests that we're paying attention to the private economy in this state.
What sadly, I do not see the General Assembly doing the work they need to do.
You're right.
I really don't.
And
because
so,
you know what,
Bob, as a former chair of the school committee, and I'm sorry I interrupted you, and as a former city council, you know a ton of what's going on in Warwick. I think it would be terrific if you could begin to help to get more people to pay attention, call the representatives, get beyond the Warwick city line, if you will, and tell everybody to wake up. Thank you so much for watching Rhode Island TV, and thank you, Bob.
Thank you.